Israel's military launched an operation that will be remembered as one of the most daring and consequential moves in recent Middle Eastern history. A strike that pierced deep into the heart of Tehran, targeting the very nerve center of Iran's power structure. The Air Force executed a precise and devastating assault on a key Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps command facility, one responsible not just for military coordination, but for the internal security of a regime long feared and mistrusted around the world. This was not a distant, obscure target on the edges of the country. This was Tehran itself, the beating heart of a complex and tightly controlled state, a city layered with defenses, surveillance, and the central hubs of power. The strike has reverberated globally, shaking governments, intelligence agencies, and ordinary citizens alike. Leaders are grappling with the unambiguous reality that a conflict long simmering beneath the surface has erupted into an entirely new, perilous phase, one in which the risks are immediate and far-reaching. The destruction of the Thar Allah headquarters, the primary IRGC command facility in Tehran, is not just a tactical victory, it is a strategic signal. Israel has demonstrated, with unflinching clarity, that it can strike anywhere its intelligence identifies a threat. And this strike is more than military muscle. It is psychological, strategic, and symbolic. Every analyst watching closely understands that this is a message not merely to Tehran, but to the entire region. No target is beyond reach, no facility beyond vulnerability. Before unpacking the full consequences of this operation, the mechanics of how it was executed, and its implications for regional and global stability, it is worth recognizing the extraordinary precision that made such a strike possible. This was not chaos unleashed, but a meticulously planned campaign of surgical force. Precision-guided munitions, intelligence coordination, and carefully timed assaults allowed Israel to breach air defenses, penetrate one of the most fortified capitals in the Middle East, and strike at the core of Iran's military and internal security apparatus. The Thar Allah headquarters was far from a simple military office or a minor outpost. Analysts describe it as a central hub linking political authority, strategic command, and ground operations. Its mandate extended well beyond the ordinary responsibilities of military command. From coordinating rapid reaction forces, to monitoring and suppressing internal dissent, to directly linking senior leadership with deployed units, this facility represented a linchpin in the Iranian power structure. Destroying it creates not only a gap in the chain of command, but a ripple of uncertainty that radiates through both military and civilian governance systems. It is impossible to overstate the significance. A facility so deeply embedded in the architecture of control cannot be replaced overnight. The disruption forces recalibrations in strategy, communications, and operational hierarchy, giving Israel and potentially its allies valuable time to consolidate advantages, monitor responses, and apply additional pressure where necessary. Within Iran, the reaction was immediate and severe. Government officials condemned the attack in the strongest terms, labeling it an act of war and a direct affront to the sovereignty and dignity of the state. While precise military responses were not immediately public, the rhetoric alone signaled a regime fully aware that a line had been crossed. The destruction of Thar Allah headquarters was framed as an existential challenge, a blow that demanded both internal fortification and external retaliation. Across the world, diplomats and foreign leaders reacted with urgency and concern. Some called for restraint and dialogue, urging both nations to de-escalate and prevent a wider conflagration. Others voiced support for Israel's right to defend itself against what they considered imminent threats. Emergency consultations and meetings unfolded in capitals from Washington to Brussels, from Riyadh to Beijing, reflecting the heightened anxiety across global political and security networks. On the streets of Tehran, the human impact was immediate and palpable. Residents recounted thunderous explosions, buildings shaking, smoke and dust clouds rising over key districts, and emergency crews rushing through the chaos. For the citizens of a city accustomed to layered defenses and the perception of security, the attack shattered any illusions of safety. The psychological reverberations were profound. In modern warfare, strategic targets are no longer abstract or distant. They exist in the centers of power, within the urban fabric of capitals, and their destruction is both literal and symbolic. As images and reports emerged, analysts began piecing together the operational blueprint behind the strike, framing it within a larger campaign known in military circles as Operation Lion's Roar. A sustained offensive, executed in coordination with allied forces, aimed to degrade Iran's command and control infrastructure and limit its ability to project military power externally. The decision to strike Tehran itself was not taken lightly. The capital is protected by sophisticated air defense networks, multiple layers of surveillance, and an array of security installations designed to prevent precisely this kind of incursion. The ability to penetrate these defenses and deliver a decisive strike indicates a level of operational sophistication and military reach that is both striking and strategically significant. Analysts immediately began evaluating the broader consequences: how Iran would respond militarily, the potential for counterstrikes by missile forces, proxy groups, or regional allies, and the possible escalation into a wider regional conflict. This attack was unlikely to remain an isolated event. Each military action carries the risk of provoking reactions, and the destruction of Thar-Allah headquarters represents a significant challenge to Iranian capabilities, morale, and operational cohesion. The implications extend far beyond the battlefield. Disruption of command structures touches on governance, political stability, and the very perception of state control. Internally, Iran may need to reorganize its leadership, reroute communications, and rely on less robust backup facilities. Each adjustment takes time, creating windows of vulnerability. Internationally, markets reacted swiftly, energy prices fluctuated, and investors watched closely, aware that prolonged tensions could disrupt vital trade routes and global oil supplies. The Middle East remains a linchpin in the world's energy infrastructure, and conflict in the region carries consequences far beyond its border. Strategically, the strike represents more than a temporary setback for Iran. It may force a fundamental reevaluation of military doctrine and readiness. With senior leadership dispersed, communications disrupted, and strategic facilities compromised, the regime must now operate under pressure with a diminished margin for error. Analysts speculate about a range of potential responses: missile launches, drone strikes, cyber operations, and hybrid engagements designed to reassert deterrence and project resilience. Each move carries its own risks, both for Iran and for those watching from abroad, highlighting the delicate balance in which regional security now rests. Meanwhile, the global diplomatic arena responded with intensity. Emergency meetings were convened, statements issued, and channels of communication opened to prevent escalation. Some nations emphasized restraint, warning that further strikes could draw additional powers into the conflict. Others called for recognition of Israel's right to respond to perceived threats, reflecting long-standing alliances and regional alignments. The complex web of political relationships means that each military action is interpreted not just in terms of immediate consequences, but in the broader calculus of international relations, economic impact, and regional influence. Back in Tehran, the Iranian regime began shaping public perception with deliberate rhetoric. Officials framed the strike as damaging, yet insufficient to cripple core capabilities. They emphasized resilience, signaling both domestic and international audiences that retaliation would follow if necessary. The messaging sought to maintain morale, assert strength, and prepare for a protracted confrontation, one in which psychological and strategic factors would be as critical as the physical destruction on the ground. Residents, however, face the stark reality of modern warfare unfolding in their streets. Explosions, sirens, and emergency response efforts underscored the vulnerability of even the most protected centers of power. In Israel, the operation was presented as a calculated, precise, and necessary action to protect national security and regional stability. Officials highlighted the meticulous planning, intelligence coordination, and technological capability required to achieve such a strike. The message was unequivocal. Threats will be met with resolve, and the ability to act decisively remains a core component of defense strategy. Public communications emphasized resilience, readiness, and the commitment to neutralize threats wherever they emerge. As global attention remained fixed on unfolding events, analysts debated the long-term consequences. Would Iran's response lead to negotiation, escalation, or a drawn-out conflict? Would this moment mark a turning point, a demonstration of deterrence, or the opening salvo in a sustained confrontation? For now, uncertainty reigns. Governments are reassessing security postures. Military forces remain on high alert, and intelligence agencies work ceaselessly to monitor developments. Each decision, each response, carries weight not just for the region, but for global security, economics, and the delicate balance of power. The destruction of the IRGC command center in Tehran has already altered calculations in multiple spheres. Militarily, it undermines internal coordination, weakens response capacity, and signals a new threshold in the Israel-Iran confrontation. Politically, it challenges authority, tests cohesion, and forces the regime to adjust communications and command structures. Economically, it introduces volatility into markets, raises questions about trade continuity, and amplifies the perception of risk in a geopolitically sensitive region. Civilians, meanwhile, confront a reality in which strategic warfare reaches into urban centers, disrupting daily life and highlighting the immediacy of modern conflict. The psychological effect on both populations is pronounced. In Iran, the destruction of a central military command facility brings home the reach and precision of modern warfare. In Israel, the operation reinforces a narrative of proactive defense, readiness, and strategic competence. Across the region, neighboring countries, international observers, and global media are all recalculating risk, adjusting strategies, and evaluating how the unfolding situation may influence alliances, military planning, and diplomatic engagement. As events continue to unfold, the story is far from over. Analysts warn that this strike may be only the beginning of a series of calculated escalations, each with the potential to further destabilize an already fragile region. Every decision, every countermeasure, every diplomatic intervention will shape the trajectory of conflict, influence markets, and affect lives on a scale that reaches far beyond the Middle East. Governments are watching, militaries are preparing, and intelligence agencies are working to anticipate the next moves. The destruction of Thar Allah headquarters has changed the game, raising the stakes, challenging assumptions, and demanding attention from anyone invested in regional stability, global security, and the dynamics of modern warfare. For viewers, understanding the complexity of these developments is crucial. This is a conflict that blends strategy, precision, technology, and human consequence in ways that resonate far beyond headlines. Every strike, every decision carries layers of implication: military, political, economic, and psychological. Staying informed is essential because in a rapidly evolving situation like this, yesterday's reality can be overturned by today's decisions. Israel's strike on Tehran is more than an isolated event. It is a marker of a conflict that is entering an unpredictable, high-stakes phase with consequences that could shape the region for years to come. In the hours following the strike, Tehran was a city transformed, not just physically, but psychologically. The destruction of the Thar Allah headquarters sent shockwaves through the regime, the military, and the population. Leaders convened emergency sessions. Military commanders reviewed contingency plans. And intelligence officers scrambled to assess the damage and patch vulnerabilities. The message from the top was clear. While the strike had been a serious blow, the core capabilities of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps remained, and Iran would respond. What form that response would take, however, remained uncertain, leaving the region and the world on edge. Missile sites were put on high alert, drone units were mobilized, and proxy networks across the region began shifting positions. Analysts predicted a range of potential retaliatory actions, from targeted strikes on military installations within Israel to asymmetric attacks through allied groups in Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq. Cyber operations were also suspected to be underway, as Iran sought to disrupt communication, financial, and intelligence networks that might support Israel and its allies. Every move was calculated, every signal weighed, because this was not merely about retaliation, it was about survival, deterrence, and maintaining the perception of strength at home and abroad. International reactions were immediate and highly polarized. Western capitals expressed concern and urged restraint, emphasizing that further escalation could have catastrophic consequences for regional stability and global markets. Energy prices spiked as traders reacted to uncertainty, aware that the Middle East remains a central artery for the world's oil supply. Neighboring countries, meanwhile, reassessed their security postures, reinforcing borders and monitoring airspace as tensions mounted. For countries far removed from the region, the strike prompted urgent diplomatic communications and crisis management exercises, underscoring the global ramifications of a localized military confrontation in an era of interconnected economies and complex alliances. Within Iran, the government sought to control the narrative, balancing public anger with a message of resilience. Officials highlighted the regime's ability to maintain command, its enduring strategic capabilities, and the inevitability of a proportionate response. State media amplified images of military readiness and reiterated that no threat would go unanswered. The psychological calculus was clear. The regime needed to reassure its citizens, assert control, and project power all while managing the uncertainty introduced by the loss of a key command hub. The civilian population, however, faced a stark and undeniable reality. The vulnerabilities of modern warfare are immediate, visible, and inescapable, even in the heart of a capital city. On the Israeli side, officials framed the operation as a decisive, necessary, and preemptive measure to safeguard national security. Public messaging emphasized precision, intelligence coordination, and operational capability. The narrative conveyed resolve, demonstrating that Israel would not hesitate to act against perceived existential threats, regardless of geography or political sensitivity. Analysts in Israel and abroad recognized that the strike would likely provoke Iranian reactions, yet they also noted that the operation significantly shifted the balance of initiative, giving Israel the strategic advantage in the immediate term. The broader implications for regional security were profound. A strike of this magnitude reshapes perceptions of vulnerability and deterrence. Neighboring states watched carefully, recalculating their positions and alliances, while global powers assessed both the risk of miscalculation and the potential for escalation into a wider conflict. Military planners considered the ramifications for logistics, troop deployments, and airspace control, while policymakers weighed diplomatic interventions, economic sanctions, and the possibility of multilateral negotiations to prevent further violence. The balance of power in the Middle East, long, fragile, and contested, had shifted at least temporarily toward the actor that had demonstrated both reach and precision. As the dust settled over Tehran, questions persisted about the regime's internal cohesion and its capacity to respond effectively. With senior leadership dispersed, command structures disrupted, and strategic infrastructure compromised, Iran faced both tactical and psychological challenges. The destruction of a central hub of control is never just a physical loss. It is an affront to authority, an interruption of decision-making, and a disruption of morale. The regime's ability to adapt quickly would determine not only the pace of retaliation, but the extent to which it could project power beyond its borders. Analysts warn that the coming days could bring a series of carefully measured escalations, limited missile strikes, precision drone attacks, cyber operations, and proxy actions, each designed to signal strength without provoking an uncontrolled spiral. Yet the potential for miscalculation remained high. In a region dense with alliances, rivalries, and conflicting interests, every strike carries the risk of unintended consequences. One misstep could transform a measured response into a broader conflict, pulling neighboring countries, allied forces, and global powers into a rapidly widening confrontation. On the global stage, diplomats worked frantically to contain tensions. Emergency meetings of the United Nations, NATO, and regional security coalitions were convened as leaders sought to mediate, assess, and prevent further escalation. Statements urged restraint, called for dialogue, and emphasized the importance of avoiding actions that could draw additional powers into the conflict. Yet the underlying reality remained. Israel and Iran had crossed a threshold, demonstrating both willingness and capability to strike decisively, and no amount of diplomacy could fully erase the consequences of that precedent. For civilians on both sides, the psychological impact was unmistakable. In Iran, the sense of vulnerability and exposure permeated daily life, as residents grappled with the knowledge that even the most fortified targets could be struck. In Israel, the public absorbed the narrative of decisive action, resilience, and preemptive defense, tempered by awareness that retaliation and escalation remained imminent possibilities. Across the region, populations watched closely, acutely aware that the dynamics of modern conflict are no longer confined to distant battlefields. They unfold in urban centers, airspace corridors, and digital networks alike. As days turned into weeks, analysts continued to examine the broader consequences for regional and global security. The strike on Thar Allah headquarters may have weakened Iran's immediate operational capabilities, but it also crystallized the realities of asymmetric conflict. Retaliation could come in unconventional forms, ranging from cyber attacks and economic disruptions to targeted proxy engagements. Each escalation would test the limits of restraint, the efficacy of diplomacy, and the ability of regional and global powers to prevent a broader conflagration. Ultimately, the events unfolding in Tehran and across the Middle East serve as a stark reminder of the fragility of modern security. The strike on Iran's central command hub is both a tactical victory and a strategic gamble, one whose consequences will resonate for months, if not years. The balance of power, the psychology of deterrence, and the mechanics of modern warfare have all shifted in an instant, forcing governments, militaries, and populations to reassess assumptions about control, vulnerability, and the reach of strategic action. For the international community, the imperative is clear. Vigilance, analysis, and preparedness have never been more critical. The Middle East, already a complex tapestry of alliances, rivalries, and strategic interests, has entered a new phase in which the calculus of power, threat, and response is more dynamic and consequential than ever before. As analysts, policymakers, and citizens observe the unfolding situation, one truth stands out: the destruction of the IRGC command center in Tehran is not the end of conflict. It is a dramatic new beginning, a turning point that will shape the region's security, politics, and global relations for the foreseeable future. Stay informed. Watch closely. The events in the Middle East are evolving by the hour, and every decision, every movement, every diplomatic or military signal has the potential to alter the trajectory of history. This is not a story in isolation. It is a narrative of strategy, consequence, and human impact, unfolding in real time, and its effects will resonate far beyond the borders of Tehran, Iran, and Israel.